Welcome back to the Business Roundtable Podcast. I have another great new guest this week, Marika Erdely from Green EconoME. We're going to talk about some great topics. One of them that we haven't delved too much onto, actually, about sustainability in business and how do you do this in your buildings, whatever you're creating out there that needs energy. We all need energy, and so one of the things we're going to talk about today is thinking more long term and ways of building momentum, creating a sustainable future for ourselves, for our business, for our families, for our communities, instead of just short-term fixes. And oftentimes, we're hit up with a lot of short-term fixes. And Rika's got a lot of great experience, and I'm going to have her be sharing quite a bit on her background, where she got to, and why she created the green economy on there. And we both come from, well, I should say I come back from an environmental consulting background. Marika, you're going to share your background and how you got to this space. But we have a lot of shared connections, and we just had a podcast episode I just recorded last week with another colleague, Shane Silsby, where we're talking about funding and getting building these capital projects and things out there. So anyways, all that to be said, we want to get to why long-term thinking isn't just smart, it's essential. And Marika's going to really share some insights here about what she does in her business and how she helps her clients in this endeavor. So Marika, welcome to the Business Roundtable Podcast. So glad to have you here. We're excited to hear from you.
Thank you, David. I'm excited to be here. It's great.
Thank you. So, Marika, you have created the green economy, but let's back it up a little bit and talk about your journey, in the financial world, and what got you to now, your place now as founder and CEO of the green economy.
Yeah, I come from an accounting background. I was an accountant for about 30 years of my life. Straight out of school, I have a business economics degree out of UCSB, and then I got an MBA from Pepperdine. So very much a financial head, numbers oriented. Never really did that great in school with words, much more with numbers.
Mhm.
And so when my last position was working as a CFO for a home builder in Calabasas, where I learned an awful lot about construction. Hadn't really done anything in that world before. I realized I really did like working in buildings, and
Mhm.
having been, and I consider myself an environmentalist. I spent a lot of time in my childhood in nature. I grew up
Mhm.
with Hungarian immigrant parents, all the other Hungarians around me were all, we were all Hungarian scouts, and we spent a lot of time in nature, and that made me really appreciate nature and want to take care of it. And when
Mhm.
I heard that Governor Schwarzenegger I think it was in 2007, came up with these ideas to implement an energy disclosure law in California, I thought, well, somebody needs to know those laws, and somebody needs to know how to produce the reports. And I thought, well, this is a great opportunity that maybe I should start a business. I'd always wanted to start a business,
Mhm.
and I'd kind of been burned out working for other people. So I thought, you know what, this is a good opportunity. Both of my kids are done with college now, and I can focus on something I want to do. And so I started Green EconoME, not really knowing what was going to happen. There was a 4-year overlap where I was still a CFO, and I was working,
Mhm.
building this business. And one of the hardest parts of this was learning how to network and sell. I had never sold a thing in my life. I knew nothing
Really good.
about KWH or KW or anything related to energy. I actually really didn't know anything about anything. I just thought, I'm going to just try
You
it.
saw an opportunity.
It's an opportunity. I got to just figure it out. And so I find it interesting now when I look back, because I mean, I was in my early 50s when I did it too. So
Mhm.
anyone who says, oh, I'm too old, I can't do this. No, it really doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter. You
I
can
love
start
that.
at any time to do whatever you want. Like, just do it. Right.
Mhm.
So I started it, and I had to learn how to network, and now I'm pretty good at that. Actually, it's pretty
Yeah.
funny. People laugh at me about that because I was always such a shy person. But um, this is a new industry. Even now, sustainability is probably 15 years old where people are really involved in it since that period of time. So I've learned a lot. I've made a lot of great friends. People in sustainability are wonderful. Generally, they're great people. So it's been a very interesting journey to get to this point of really understanding how buildings operate and running a small business.
Well, I mean, I commend you for that, and I echo that. I'm 51. I started Steward Your Business a couple years ago, and there was a lot of like, who am I to do this? How am I going to figure this out? Like you said, Marika. But one of the concepts I wanted to talk with you about is this idea of I call the gap of the gain mindset. But the idea that the gain is like there's so much we can do, there's so much we can build. You saw the gain, you saw the possibility, and I think that helps drive our long-term thinking of what could be versus all the things that we haven't done. And sometimes we are looking always at the gap of like behind us. Oh my goodness, what's the loss? But what I hear you say, Marika, is like, look, there's an opportunity here. There's something that we could be done, and hey, why not me? Why don't I step out into this world and stretch myself and use my gifts and my talents that I've found. And look, here you are, so many years later, continuing to do this. And like you said, it's still relatively, I mean, yes, it's been around, but it's still relatively new. We're still learning, we're still adapting, trying to figure this out. And so I just want to say I'm grateful for you. One of the reasons we have the Business Roundtable podcast is so other business owners and leaders can hear from each other and know I'm not alone in this. There's other people that have gone before me and maybe haven't been known all the answers. And that's okay. We don't have to have all the answers. We come together, we collaborate, right? And so,
Yep.
you saw this opportunity, and I'm sure you see clients possibly that get stuck in what I call the gap instead of helping them see and reframe and say, here's the possibility, here's what could be. Maybe speak to that a little bit, Marika.
Yeah, I think sometimes people don't understand that when you do a lighting retrofit or something like that, which, number one thing you should do in a building is a LED retrofit. Not only our fluorescence banned in California, but anywhere in the country, um, you know, going to LED is at least a 50% reduction in your wattage of every lamp you have in your building. So that's a huge reduction, actually. It ends
Hmm.
up being quite a bit of money. But what people don't understand is I've had multiple times, oh, we did a retrofit and we didn't see any savings. Well, it's people are looking at the dollar value of their invoice, not just the reduction in energy usage, because the cost of energy continues to rise. So even if you're reducing your usage, because the utilities are going to continue to raise their prices, which now even especially in LA with the LA fires, now all these utilities are getting either sued or all these costs to rebuild. It's
Hmm.
this, it's the user, that's going to be paying for it. So the cost of energy is not going down. So it's really important to just think about, okay, yes, you think it's not going to make a difference, but it really does make a difference. You just maybe are looking at the wrong numbers, and maybe
Hmm.
that's why you don't understand that there was a reduction. You just didn't see it because the costs went up. So it's
Hmm.
trying to explain that to people I find very interesting. Like sometimes when I really go into a utility bill and explain it to someone, they're like, "Oh my God, I had no idea," because those
Hmm.
bills are also so confusing that it's
Yes.
almost like you can't even figure it out unless you
Hmm.
really have somebody explain it to you. And that kind of creates this gap of not understanding. You're paying this bill, you don't understand it, you're
Hmm.
annoyed, but then also you're
Yes.
a little worried about hiring somebody to change things because you actually don't know what's going to happen. If the things are they going to cost going to go down, so it's trying to develop that trust
Yeah.
with the client so they understand that you actually understand what you're talking about, and then they're going to trust you to make the changes in the building.
Yeah, well, I would get it's one of the things that we talked about before we started recording the podcast is, and I would want to know is like you said, you're looking after the fact, but what is that? Like you said, be clear. You have like a benchmarking report, and there's some technical things in there, but as an entry point, like okay, what is our basis? What's our understanding of what's the facts here? Because sometimes I think people like it's muddy, like you said, and it's like how to clarify having somebody like you, Marika, come in there and say, okay, let's break this all down. Let's see how this is all interconnected, right?
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a lot of times, I mean, we do a lot of benchmarking. So that's what I started the business, and that's basically what Governor Schwarzenegger started with was these benchmarking laws, right? And use the
Mhm.
EPA software to portfolio manager to benchmark a building, which is basically identifying how energy efficient it is by use. There's like 80 different uses against its peer buildings and itself, peer buildings in the software. So it gives you a really good measure of how your building is performing, and doing that accurately. Like, there's a lot of people that do it, but how many people actually do it
Yeah.
accurately is another question. We try very hard to always do it accurately. So then
Hmm.
it means something, right? That data
Yes.
then is providing you a baseline of, oh, wow, this is how my building is performing against myself, like period
Hmm.
from last year to this year, or against the other software, other similar use buildings in the software. It gives you a really good measure. And if you look at that and then you make changes in your building, that MNV we were talking about, where you go in and you can see the changes, the reduction, the scores, are adjusted to the better or worse based on what's going on in the building. It's the validation of it, right? It's there.
Hmm.
It's not, if it's done accurately, it's very interesting to see what those metrics show you.
Yeah, I would imagine too, Marika, like you're saying. I mean, so you have to have somebody that can go in there and get truly to the facts. This is not manipulating anything. It's being really clear. But and then like you said too, it's comparing, that building with other buildings. So hopefully, everybody's on the same page. But here's the thing: it's challenging if nobody's, like I said, they're all looking at it effectively or doing it, accurately. Right, we can only make informed decisions if we have an accurate foundation, and if it's like fuzzy or you can't compare, it's like, the apples to oranges analogy, that's really hard. It's like we got to be able to talk about the same things if we're talking past each other. So having somebody like you, Marie, could come in there and say, look, I know all these 80 different uses, I know how to assess these things, and this is what all of these things mean, is very valuable. That's why we want to hire somebody like you that can help us. And for me, as a coach, I'll put my coach hat up when I'm helping people, individuals. It's the same thing. We're trying to get a baseline factual understanding, because if we don't have that, really, really everything else is like you can't make informed long-term decisions without that baseline understanding.
Yeah, it's super important. And people, I find that we're not the cheapest to do
Hmm.
that. And so
Hmm.
there's other people that do it for less money. But if it's not right, and then you have a second phase of it, because these benchmarking laws, there's about 40 something of them across the country, and about 17 of them have a second phase, a BPS, a building performance standard, which is
Hmm.
then you have to do something else with that data. So if you don't do
Yep.
that, if that initial data isn't correct, then what you're doing on the second phase isn't correct. You might be overpaying on the second phase, even though you thought you were getting a deal because you paid nothing or very little on the first phase, but you're paying for it later. So
Yep.
it's that, people just need to understand you kind of pay for what you get. That's,
Yeah, no,
you know,
I agree, Tess. That's why we have, like, you hear Marika on, so people can listen and hear and know. And I 100% agree with you. It's like building on that foundation. It will actually save you money in the long run if you do that. I had a couple lawyers on the podcast in recent episodes, Marika, the same kind of thing. If you're not getting your legal financial house in order, and later on you get sued, you don't have the right things in place, you're just going to be much more costly. You didn't spend the time up front. And again, it's this long-term thinking versus short-term thinking. And I think sometimes, leaders are chasing maybe incentives or patchwork solutions because they're like, oh, there's this, and they're not bringing it all back together, and really looking at that so they can drive smarter, capital planning, looking at these.
yeah. And I think some people just don't want to look forward and
Mhm.
address, like, one of the biggest problems is, I spoke to someone yesterday, a large portfolio, equity fund portfolio, and they're having trouble getting the data from their tenants, right? The tenant, in order to benchmark a building, you have the tenant, depending upon the utility and how many meters are at the building, many times you need the tenant to authorize that data to come into the software. And if you don't have that as part of the lease, or if that's not something brought up initially with the tenant, whether you just bought the building or it's a new tenant, but you're not bringing that story up of, look, we care about our benchmarking, we need to have this. Because a lot of companies, what we're talking about is compliance reporting, but now we have companies that actually care about it and are reporting it as part of their ESG, or environmental social governance strategies, for their investment report or their GRES reporting, whatever's going on with that. It's a whole other world that exists now that didn't exist 15 years ago. if they want to do that, they need that utility data. And if they can't get the tenant to sign the authorization, they can't get the data. But how do you
Mm,
make sure that that's happening? You have to make sure that the leases are accurate. The leases reflect that, and that
mhm.
communication is happening early on. But some people are worried to do that, right? They don't want to ruin the deal, so they're not going to bring it up. But then later you need to get that data. So then how do you get the data? So there's like this cycle that is not really getting addressed in the
Mhm.
leases that are out there. And I think that's one of the problems too, that people then are struggling to get that data from the tenant.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, I can speak whether that's leases or any kind of getting people to come in alignment, like you're saying, Marika. You have to give them the bigger picture, like what you're trying to achieve in the vision, and get buy-in. And like, look, I don't want to upset them, but like, hey, look, this is all going to help us in the long run if we can get this data. It's not just me, the business owner. I'm trying to help you too, because I can hopefully lower costs and other things in the building overall if we can run this well. But yeah, if we're not doing that, like you said, there's these cycles and just not able to communicate well. So that can be challenging. Absolutely, I hear
Yeah.
what you're saying. You know, um, what would you say right now? Maybe is kind of the biggest financial myths that leaders believe about kind of any energy retrofits. Like, what's your thought there?
I think people are scared to put the money in. Like I said earlier, I think sometimes people don't understand the actual savings.
Hmm.
I think with like as an example, solar. Solar
Hmm.
is on a property makes so much sense. Now, even if you're an owner operator, then it definitely does, right? Because you're as the owner, so benefit to your building, and then also you're using the energy yourself, what's generated. So yeah, easy, no
Hmm.
problem. You should definitely do it. But even if you have a triple net lease where someone else is using the energy, but it's on the building, you could either put the solar on and sell it back to the grid, or you could sell it to the tenant, or you could make a smaller, you know, solar. I mean, there's community solar where you could sell it, and on the East Coast, you could sell it back to the grid. So there's
Hmm.
different ways that you can monetize
Hmm.
that generation to your
Yep.
benefit. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of people don't understand that. There's softwares out there right now where you could, in California especially, you can sell the energy back to the tenant at, let's say, a lower price than the tenant is paying currently to the utility. And then all of a sudden, the owner of the building now has a new revenue stream that they didn't even know it was a roof.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
plus 50% or so, like 70% of the solar system right now is tax benefits, even though they're frozen. It's part of the Inflation Reduction Act, and this current administration has frozen it. Still, it's going to take an act of Congress to relieve that on free
Hmm.
to get rid of those tax benefits. But right now they're in effect, and they're like, if 70% of your solar system is covered by tax benefits and you have a tax liability running that building or in your
Hmm.
entity that owns that building, it's a no-brainer, right? So I
Hmm.
think it's just convincing people that it makes sense because you're going to increase the value of your property. You could also increase your, revenue from your property.
Hmm.
You're going to take you're taking advantage of tax benefits that are out there currently, which may not be there later.
Yep.
So why not do it? It's just
Yeah.
kind of
Look at
convincing people. They don't want to part with their money, but then they get it back next year anyway in
Yeah, they
tax
you
time.
gotta think
So
a little bit, yeah, so short term, yes, okay, you're gonna get, invest your money in this way, and then think of it as an investment. It's not like you're losing your money, it's going in there like you said, and I loved how you brought up, Marika, some different options. There's depending on your circumstances and having somebody like Marika look at your circumstances, look at the facts. What does that look like for you as owner operator, or, how it's gonna benefit, those that are in the building, those that are leasing the building or the space. There's different a revenue stream. I like, how you present it. There's lots of different options. Sometimes we can't even see the option or the possibilities because we get, kind of a fixed mindset or I know this. And so what I like to have on the Business Roundtable podcast is creating an opportunity to kind of put those fixed mindset or what we think we know and understand. And it could be right, it could be wrong, but just for putting that in a space where hey, let's investigate. Let's see what could be, what's out there. And like you mentioned, Rika, there's a whole bunch of different programs across multiple states, depending on where you're listening to this. Uh, you know, different incentives in right now, like you said, tax taxes and others, and depending on what your circumstances. So to me, I'm hearing lots of variables, Marika, and so it's like taking all these variables and distilling them down into what makes sense for you. And having something like you, Marika, that has a specialty in looking at numbers and breaking all this down and just saying, look, here's how this all plays out for you.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's it's interesting to do when you really look at all of it. But it really, at the end of the day, when you have an energy efficient building, your net operating income of that building is going to be higher, right? It's just going to be higher. Your energy costs are going to be lower. Um, when you have a higher NOI, that's going to mean your building is worth more money, right? So if you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to sell it, if you have a tenant that moves in and needs to report on their emissions, which that's happening, more regularly now, where large corporations have to report on their emissions of what they're consuming in running their businesses. If you have an efficient building, then that tenant is going to be more likely to lease your building than another building that's not efficient. So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of a no-brainer, really, to do it. It's just, yeah, and you have to look at everything. I mean, you have to look at the HVAC systems, you have to look at the lighting. I mean, those are the two things that are really the most important. Building envelope is important, but it's very expensive to,
Mm-hmm.
retrofit, and the payback on that is really long. So, I mean, a lot of people don't want to touch the envelope, but the mechanical systems and the lighting is pretty
Well,
important. And
I
then you
mean,
add solar.
start where you can. I mean, and this idea of, but how do we can create the momentum, keep that going. And one of the things you brought up was you have different models. One of them you said is like your measurement and verification models. Like, how do we measure this and manage it so that we know it's actually working?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most interesting things that we're doing right now is we have a couple energy um, modeling and then monitoring. Those are two different things. Modeling would be how is the building using energy right now, and it's based on the equipment that you currently have, the existing
Mhm.
conditions, and then you compare that against what you're going to be putting into the building and the efficiency of that new equipment, and you can see how efficiently the building is working. So that
Mhm.
will validate the fact that if you're spending $2 million by changing out your mechanical system, is it going to make sense? And what is the long-term energy savings and cost
Mhm.
savings you're going to have? So energy models can tell you that, like, okay, you spend $2 million, but you're going to have, $100,000 less monthly. So maybe the payback is 10 years, but you're not planning to sell the building. It's going to be in your family. You're going
Mhm.
to, don't, your kids are going to inherit it. So it's like, well, you're going to invest in it now. Why not? Because you're going to have that savings. And I think one thing I try and push is this, also part of the Inflation Reduction Act, is the Section 179 deduction, where there's also an energy model, but that energy model right now is ASHRAE 90.1 2007, which is the standard at which buildings were built in. But the comparison is 2007, which has fluorescent lighting compared to what you're doing now. And that 50% reduction there, that gives you a really nice tax deduction. So you can you do the retrofits in your building, but then you also get a tax deduction for it. So that's a
Yeah.
nice bonus as well. And a lot of people don't even know about that. So
Yeah. So there's
there's a
different
lot of money out there. You just have to find
You
it.
just have to find it. And I think seeing this, and I think I'm speaking to the business owners, the entrepreneurs out there that see that, hey, look, if I invest in this, like there are models, like nothing is set for sure 100%, right? There are models, but this is based on science, is best information that we have, that we know, and you have to make informed decisions here. And so, I think encouraging as you're listening to Marika talk here, like how important it is to think about the future and what could be, and basing that on, like we talked earlier about the facts and understanding, and then move forward, and investing in that. I really like the word investing because I feel like it will come back, like you said, whether you hold on to the building, or you end up selling it. You're looking at, I like you're talking about you're aligning this with sustainability, with the financial modeling, right? What's your net operating income that's going to come from this? And so this is where I felt like a lot of synergy with what I do as steward your business and what you're doing, Marika, is like, how do we create sustainability and momentum and looking toward the future? And I think this is so important because I think, like, honestly, people that want to do this, if they're investing in themselves and they see the value of that, it's like, okay, well, why not do it in my physical structure, the space that I'm in doing? Because this is long-term sustainable way of thinking and being, you know?
Yeah, and efficient buildings too generally have better air quality,
Mm.
right? And we all
Hmm.
had issues during COVID with the ventilation issues and
Yep.
all of that. And I mean,
Hmm.
that's a major thing. I mean, when we
Hmm.
Energy Star certify a building, you have to do air testing associated with that air. And that could be a huge difference when you have proper ventilation in a building for people not getting sick. I mean, people will
Yeah.
say that, but it really does make a difference, and you can sense it when you walk into a building.
Oh,
So there's
yeah.
a tenant part of that too, that tenants will stay, and with all this back to work too, right? A lot of
Uh-huh.
people are having to go back. So you want to
Yeah, if
have
you
that
wanna go
building
back you
efficient.
wanna go back and feel like you're going into a healthy environment, a positive, not some derelict building that's, like, I don't know, are they taking care of things, things running well, or is this being run, because of it's like, "Hey, I wanna come to a place that's being well taken care of, it's a welcoming environment, I know that they're doing an effort on all aspects," It makes me feel better when I go into a building and see if it's a green building or whatnot, or I can tell that they're making an effort to improve it. Sometimes it's hard to see, right up front, but I think this is important. I think that I like what you were saying earlier, Marika, as you're talking to sustainability experts and others, that's just the mindset and understanding and a way of approaching the world. It's a little differently than maybe some of the folks just in our day to day, and having you bring this perspective and helping people see things a little differently.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of parts to it too, right? Trash is another part too. We're
Hmm.
a consultant for a conference center and a camp, and one of the things we're focused on is trash. Like what
Hmm.
all the trash that would come in, and how do you deal with that sustainably?
Yeah.
And looking at that piece too, not only the water piece, but the
Hmm.
trash as well. To how do we do a better job with that? Because we're such a disposable society,
Yep.
and really, and I think one of the things I talked about in my staff meeting this week too was this, hope, that, we
Mm.
got to just believe in hope, and we got to do what we can, like live a sustainable life, make good choices in the things you purchase, in the way you live your life, because all of that adds up, and maybe that also spreads to your friends, so that more people are doing it. Just, I think in this world that we have right now, we have to join together and
Mhm.
really help each other, support each other, and take care of the planet, right? Like
Yeah.
really not just say it, but actually do it.
Find ways we could do it, even, as small as it may seem at the moment, right? I mean, you've worked with schools, large commercial firms, and so many more, getting this buy-in across stakeholders, right, Marika? That's what I hear you saying is
Yeah.
like, how do we get everyone thinking about this thing, not in their own isolated world? I find this too with just people and organizations, and people just kind of get in their own world. I'm like, okay, yes, but let's cross over because there's greater synergy and we can help each other instead of just staying siloed. But I don't know what it is, like human nature or whatnot. Sometimes we just silo ourselves and we don't talk. And all we need is it's not a major thing. It's just, you know, like you said, talking with, I mean, one of the things, I'll just bring up the trash thing, Marika, because, me as a biologist by background, right? Just literally covering the lids of like commercial trash lids because ravens and other things pull out the trash. It's subsidizing, the ravens, which predate on tortoises and other endangered species. It's like just the fact that you close your lid can make a huge difference in subsidizing a predator. And so
Right.
it's something small like that, right? And so it was just, it was actually the Palm Springs Zoo and having doing initiative and sending out some people talking to restaurants and encouraging them, right? But it's not a one-time thing. That's what I find, Marika. It's not like you have a one-time conversation and then that solves it. It isn't that way. It's an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, and I think I think that's a great example with the ravens, and I think it's, we went and did a beach cleanup a couple weeks ago with Surf Rider, who's a great organization, and
Mhm.
they even weigh the trash as you bring it
Yeah.
in,
Yep.
sort it. I mean, it was very impressive. But it's just the amount of trash. Like, what do people think that somebody? I mean, oh, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to leave it on the beach. I just can't believe that. It's just like
Mhm.
everyone should be taught to throw your trash in the trash can.
Mhm.
Simple things like that, and those all that all is important, right? It gets in the plastic gets in the wrong bodies.
Mhm.
We want to take care of each other. And I think
Yeah.
that's the message I'm always trying to say is, let's work together to
Yes.
accomplish good things. We're not going to be able to do it by ourselves. I mean, we don't have most people don't have the expertise to do things anyway, right?
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
have to work together.
Yes.
There's no other
Absolutely.
there's no other solution. So why not and really help each other? I don't, I think to me that's the most important message is let's work together and do a better job at everything. And that's part of that is taking care of our planet.
I love that, Marika. I know we're getting close to the end of the episode here. We're going to provide links to Green EconoME, and any other resources. Honestly, Marika, you feel like our audience should be checking out, because we're not just here. You and I are here in California, but our podcast goes across the country, actually across the world. We're grateful to have listeners checking in, following us on YouTube, and providing comments, feedback, because I'll make sure Marika gets that to them. But Marika, I really like your last call to action or just reminder to folks. But as we're wrapping up here, what can just last takeaways for whether you're a business owner or an individual, in sustainability, and how can we be a better steward of what we've been entrusted?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, to do two things in your building that are significant, or three actually significant, and I think make a lot of difference is one, the LEDs. Figure out what, and it is kind of complicated because LEDs come in different color temperatures, they come in different wattages, lumens. I get that it's confusing. Sure there's help, reach out, but that's one. Change out to LEDs. The second is better thermostats, right? You don't want to have waste in buildings. And the best way to manage that is to have good thermostats. So the air conditioning system isn't operating when no one's in the building. That's
Mm,
that's bad. So you want to do that. The third thing is water, right? Aerators on faucets reduce the water outflow, gallons per minute, GPM. That makes a difference too. Water's how much is coming out can make a big difference in gallons per day. And those three little things that really aren't huge expenses. I mean, yes, you're going to do the LED retrofit, but it's going to be payback is probably less than a year. It's a no-brainer, right? You've spent
mm,
your bill is immediately going to go down. So these are all things that help your building be more sustainable. And plus, LEDs are better on the eyes as well for for people working under fluorescent lights. A lot of people don't like that, so kind of
mhm.
needs them. So
So many great. I mean, these are just small things, and you guys can connect with Marika and her team at Green EconoME to learn more. I'm sure she'll happy to talk with you, guide you
yeah,
through, see if it's how they can help you. We're connected on LinkedIn as well, so look us up there. Marika, thank you so much for being a part of the Business Roundtable podcast, sharing some insights today, encouraging us with your insights and good words for the day.
thank you, David. Yep, thank you for having me.
Thanks, everybody. Again, please, of course, like and subscribe. We always appreciate you following us along on your favorite podcast platform, whatever that might be. And until next time, be well. Thanks, everybody. Take care.